Welcome to this recording on BI's secret dimension. Many of us are at various stages within our BI journey, which I love to refer to as the steps to our BI nirvana. So some of the information which I'll present in these slides may be old news for some, but for others this may be relatively new, and therefore you may gain some valuable insight into your business and into your reporting needs. I like to think of our journey in terms of the golden fish that we see on the presentation, leaving one world where there's a bowl which only has water in it, moving to something which is much more visual, something where there is a lot of life. The tagline in terms of this is helping you see and understand data. And for me, that is really what business intelligence is all about. To kick things off, a couple of questions about our data. How is your data? The questions which we need to answer for ourselves are, what are the various sources of data that we're using? Are these sources getting more complex, or are they less so? Is it easy to access all these sources of data, or are we struggling to get through and gain some useful insight from the data that we have? Very importantly, what is the integrity of your data like? Many companies which we go into really struggle in terms of the integrity of data. And as the old adage goes, garbage in, garbage out. It's therefore very critical that we have data which can be trusted. There are situations where I've had where the most beautiful and most insightful BI projects have been completed, but the moment the data is called into question, it undoes all the hard work that has actually gone into it. Next question to respond to is, who maintains your data? Is that done internally? Is it done externally? And what impact does that have on your ability to actually access your data and gain some meaningful business insight into it? How much data do you have? Do you have insufficient data? Do you have more data than you've ever had an opportunity to work through? And very importantly as well, how often is that data backed up? Ultimately, the question that we need to answer is, are you data rich or are you data poor? Most organizations I have dealt with are actually very data rich. No one out there is saying that they don't have sufficient data in order to analyze in general. Having looked at that, the next question to pose is, how is your information? Because BI is really about moving from data to information through to insight and knowledge. So, are your information requirements currently met within your organization? What are the shortcomings, if any? What do you really like about the current reporting and BI that you have? Is your BI presented in an easily interpreted way, or do you have to spend time digging through in order to understand what you want to get to in your data? Is it easy to access your information, or do you have to go through a long and laborious process in order to get there? Is the data easy to update? The information which you are displaying, is it easy to update? If you have a need to add an extra dimension, is that easy? And very tied into that is, how long do you have to wait to get reports? Are you able to get your insight at the speed of thought, or is there a long process that you find yourself caught in before you can get access to your data? Who creates your reports? Are you able to create those reports yourself, or are you entirely dependent upon a small skilled user pool in order to get your reports? That becomes very critical, especially when we're looking at SMEs. Do you have an integrated reporting system? In other words, do you have the ability to pull through data from various systems, let's say your payroll, for example, and blend that with data which is coming through from your finance system? Is your reporting portable? Do you always have to only access it from your laptop when you are connected to the internal network of the organization? Or if you were a salesperson, would you be able to go through in front of your client and access it on whatever mobile device you may have? That ties in with, can you access it remotely? And very importantly, does it actually improve the communication? So do you get stuck in situations where only one person has got access to certain data which would be very beneficial to the entire organization if it was available? Once you have concluded your report or you've analyzed your report, how easy is it to actually share your insights with the rest of the business? Key questions is, are you information rich or are you information poor? Many organizations we find are actually information poor. So you have data rich on the one hand and information poor on the other hand. Often when we're looking at data and analyzing data, it's what is it that actually makes information meaningful and useful? Many people think it's a computer program or certain databases or the structures, but really it is only the human brain that can make that information meaningful and useful. So data analysis is really taking a look at the data, and what we understand is that the meaning resides in the data, and the human brain is the only one which can make sense of the data. Once we combine these two, then we actually have some insight into the data. Traditionally, there are two methods of how we get answers from our data. The first one is the more typical one, where we basically go ahead and we define exactly what it is that we want to see in a report. Once that has been defined, that is farmed off to someone else who then does a whole lot of magic in the background and comes to us with the answers. Invariably, we take a look at those answers and say, oopsie, we forgot to actually add a dimension, or we wanted to see the data which has been presented across a different date range. Then the cycle begins all over again. A second method, and one which we're pushing for in terms of rapid BI, is to say make all the data available and allow the users to actually explore the data and see what it reveals. This is a radical departure from the way we normally used to analyzing our data. I would make this akin to sitting at a table and taking a look at your room. Once you actually stand up on the table and you look at that same room, you normally get a totally different perspective of things. And that is really the mind shift which is required in terms of the way we analyze our data. The second point is actually shown in terms of Schneiderman's mantra. Schneiderman is the one who came up with tree maps. And basically what he's saying is we need to take an overview of our data. Once we have taken a look at that overview, eyeballing it, we take specific actions. In other words, we zoom in and we filter on those areas which are of interest. In terms of zooming in and filtering on those actions, it allows us to get the details that we require on demand. So if we're taking a look, we can go at the high level, filter in, move lower down, re-eyeball, reassess, and keep drilling through until we get to a point where the light bulb actually goes off. Good analysis in terms of our data is really about keeping our eyes on the goal. We need to understand what it is and why it is that we want to look at that data and get involved in BI projects, especially as SMEs. There are actually two key reasons why we would look at data. The first one is to help us to better manage the present. However, when we're looking at better managing the present, we're really looking at data which is almost historic in nature. We're taking a different look. So we're saying what is happening and what is causing it to happen. So we've already got that data, and that in its own way is a lag indicator. We also need to bear in mind that we also want to have lead indicators. Lead indicators really allow us to do some predictive analysis. So in other words, what we're saying is, what do we want to happen and how are we actually going to make that happen? To give you an example, if you are a restaurant, you may understand that you've got certain people who are coming in on certain days and they're coming in because we've got a special. That's really better managing the present. That's what is happening and what's causing it to happen. If we wanted to do predictions, we could start mining that data and say, when we have certain specials on certain days, the increase in the number of people is of a certain magnitude, which means that I should already have ordered sufficient to cater for that. You could further take it from a predictive stance and take a look at how those figures of visitors coming into your restaurant increase based on the number of combinations or certain combinations of products that you are selling. And why would we want to do all of this? Firstly, it's to make sure that we create the opportunities. We do not want to miss out on opportunities to improve our business. And secondly, it's to prevent any problems arising in terms of the future. What is data visualization? I have mentioned it a few times. The definition which Stephen Few, one of the fathers of data visualizations, gives is that data visualization is the use of computer-supported interactive visual representation of abstract data to amplify cognition. So a few points which come through in terms of that. Number one, it has to be computer supported. The visualizations that we build need to be displayed on a medium, and that medium is the computer because it's got that power to harness all the data, do quick analysis, and be presented. It needs to be interactive. We need to be able to easily manipulate the data which we're seeing displayed on the data visualization. We need to be able to drill down into it. We need to be able to filter that data. We need to be able to view what that underlying data is. So that data needs to be alive. It needs to be visual. In other words, simple numbers or spreadsheets don't really qualify as a data visualization unless taken forward and graphs begin to be used. So those data visualization forms, we begin to use attributes such as location, length, shape, color, and size so as to allow users to more easily spot trends and patterns and exceptions. Lastly, to amplify cognition. Cognition is really the process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. So that visualization we see should allow us to get to that level. What we have here is a classic example of abuse of a dashboard or a data visualization. We need to realize that the purpose of a data visualization, it's not to make pretty pictures, but it's actually to help us think. So some thought needs to go into the actual pulling together of the data and how it will be presented to the person that is going to consume it. So there's certain things we need to think of and consider in that. Certain things like, do 3D graphs actually work properly? Is there a better way of displaying the data rather than using gauges? One of the key disadvantages with gauges, which many people like in terms of data visualization, is it doesn't actually give you an accurate picture in terms of trends, for example. It doesn't allow you to easily compare what happened last year versus this year or versus any time period you're looking at. So such things need to go in. So while your data visualization may look really pretty, it may not actually be the best thing to use. There are a few things to consider when we're thinking of data visualization. The first one is that we do not actually attend to everything that we see. And I will show two examples to try and demonstrate this principle. I'm just going to go externally and open up a certain picture. Now, if we take a look at this, what is the difference between this flashing picture? For most people, they'll struggle to actually pick up the difference between the two. I will pause it and just show you something. If we take a look at the bottom in the first frame, we can see there a shadow. If we move through to the second frame, the shadow actually isn't there. This goes to show that we are not attending to absolutely everything that we see. The brain is just incapable. Therefore, when we are pulling together data visualizations, we need to bear this in mind. A second example to possibly illustrate the same thing. Can you spot the difference between the flashing that is going on? Once again, most people wouldn't be able to easily spot the difference. The difference in the first frame, if we look around the face, you can see that the background is darker. And if we move to the second frame, that background is actually lighter. Although our eyes have actually seen what was shown, we did not actually attend to it, and we don't want to lose people in terms of our visualizations in the same way. The attributes which really work best when we're taking a look at building data visualizations are shown above. So what we can see on there, you can see length works very well. People easily pick up lengths. They pick up widths very quickly, and also orientation. Also, spatial groupings are patterns, sizes, shapes, curvature, blurs, and enclosures. Those are all easy to pick up, along with using either hue, intensity, two-dimensional positioning, and direction. All these things are easy for the human eyes to pick up and to make use of. So those are the key things which we should use, as they are easy to pick up, and it's much easier for us to pay attention to those. Fact number 2, our eyes are drawn to familiar patterns. This becomes very key in terms of presenting our data, because if our eyes are drawn in a certain direction, we may actually lose context, or we may lose certain information which should have really been highlighted in terms of the data visualization. Taking a look at this picture, most people will spot a rose because that is what we are used to seeing. But if we take a close look over here, we can actually see a dolphin in the background. A second one, most people would spot a tiger on this. But if we look over here, we can actually see a face which is imprinted on there. So our eyes are normally drawn to certain patterns, and this has a bearing in terms of how it is we are to actually display images. Lastly, as a third one, is that memory plays an important role in human cognition, but working memory is extremely limited. So we shouldn't make our visualizations so busy that a person needs to keep switching and keep a lot of things in their mind when we're doing these visualizations. Once again, this can be illustrated by having you look at first the left picture, then the right picture. You will notice on there, if you take a close look, that the horizon size is actually different. But because there's so much happening in that visualization, it may be tough for you to spot that at first. And when we're creating visualizations, we want people to be able to assimilate and understand the data immediately. I will like to touch just on color very quickly as we bring this talk to an end. Edward Tufte said, avoiding catastrophe becomes the first principle in bringing color to information. Above all, do no harm. Why is this actually important? Well, the reason that it's important is we have so many people who are colorblind whom we don't actually realize are colorblind. And a lot of the color blindness may not be the classic red-green color blindness, but a lot of it could come in terms of the actual shades which are used. So if we're taking a look at the text in the background, it's critical that we understand how text and the background have a bearing in terms of how we perceive what is written. This slide here actually shows what the rainbow looks like to a person with normal vision. Then you've got someone with protanopia, and then deuteranopia and tritanopia. And we can see that having used these colors, which we might think are very easy to distinguish between, for some people, especially looking at the deuteranopia one, you can see that they might have trouble actually splitting up those colors, and therefore the message we're trying to communicate might get lost in the color which we're actually using. Our last slide. What do we use BI and data visualization for? And these become key in terms of the rest of our rapid BI presentations that we're going to take a look at. Well, we use it for reporting, we use it for analyzing our data, we use it for monitoring what is currently going on, we use it for planning that's got to do with the predictive capability, and we use it for communicating. Thank you.